Hey, warriors. They found Professor Marcus Thorpe at dawn, slumped over his mahogany desk in the university library. The security guard thought he was dead. But Marcus was very much alive, surrounded by 8 leather-bound journals, each one filled with his wife, Sarah's handwriting. Letters she had written to their daughter, Emma. Letters he had never opened. Until tonight. 3 months ago, a car accident stole them both. Tonight, Marcus finally had the courage to read what Sarah left behind. And hidden within her words, he discovered something that changed everything, the 7 Stoic principles she had been studying in secret, preparing to teach Emma when she turned 13. Sarah knew suffering. She had survived cancer twice, lost her parents young, rebuilt herself from nothing, and in these journals, she had decoded the ancient wisdom that kept her unbreakable. Not theories, but battle-tested truths forged in real pain. Marcus opened the first journal. On the cover, in Sarah's elegant script, "For Emma, and for you, my love, when the storm comes." The storm had come, and now, breath by breath, page by page, Marcus would learn what his wife had always known. Suffering doesn't break you. It forges you. Comment below. Transform grief into personal strength. Like the video. If this video is new to you, please subscribe. Join a community that builds strength through clarity, discipline, and self-control. Stoic Truth 1. Master your inner fortress. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. Journal entry. February 14th. Sarah's handwriting. Emma, darling, when you feel the world spinning out of control, remember this. You always have one sanctuary no one can invade. Your mind. Today I learned my cancer is back. The doctors spoke in percentages and probabilities, their voices clinical and distant. Your father cried in the parking lot, his shoulders shaking with the weight of what we'd just heard. But I sat in the car and did what Epictetus taught. I separated what I can control from what I cannot. Marcus's hands trembled as he read. He remembered that day with painful clarity. The phone call that shattered their morning, the numb drive home through traffic that seemed absurdly normal. He had felt powerless then, utterly, devastatingly powerless. And now, reading her words, he realized Sarah had found power in the exact same moment, in the exact same parking lot where he had felt none. I cannot control the cancer cells multiplying in my body. I cannot rewrite my diagnosis or negotiate with my DNA. I cannot force my body to cooperate through sheer willpower. But I can control my response to all of this. I can choose courage over despair. I can love you and your father more fiercely, more intentionally, in whatever time remains. That choice, that inner fortress, is mine alone. No disease, no doctor, no fate can take that from me. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the tears fall freely now. For 3 months he had surrendered his mind to absolute chaos. Guilt gnawed at him constantly. Rage erupted at random moments. What-ifs circled endlessly like vultures over carrion, picking at the remains of his sanity. He had tried to control the past, to resurrect the dead, to undo the irreversible through sheer mental force. And in doing so, he had abandoned the one territory he actually commanded. His own thoughts, his own responses, his own choices in each present moment. He thought of Epictetus again, the slave-turned-philosopher who had less freedom than almost anyone in ancient Rome, yet found liberation in his mind. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The external circumstances may be chains, but the internal response remains free. The library was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant sound of a siren outside. The city slept around him. Inside this borrowed sanctuary, Marcus made a decision. He could not bring them back. No amount of magical thinking would resurrect Sarah and Emma. But he could honor Sarah's wisdom by reclaiming his mind, breath by breath, thought by thought, moment by moment. He whispered to the empty room, his voice hoarse from disuse. I cannot control the accident. I cannot change what happened. But I can control myself. I can control what I do with this grief. The first journal closed softly in his hands. 7 more waited on the table. The night was long, but Marcus felt the first ember of strength ignite in his chest. Small, fragile, but undeniably there. Sarah had left him a map through the darkest terrain. He would follow it, step by deliberate step, through the wilderness of grief. Comment. I control my mind. I choose my response. Stoic Truth 2. Release what you cannot hold. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca Journal Entry. March 3rd. Today I tried to fix everything, Emma. I spent 8 hours online, researching every clinical trial, every alternative therapy, every miracle story on the internet. I read about experimental treatments in Germany, about holistic approaches in India, about supplements and diets and meditation techniques. I exhausted myself trying to control the uncontrollable, as if the right combination of effort and information could bend reality to my will. Then, collapsed in bed with my laptop overheating on my chest, I remembered Seneca's wisdom. The art of living is knowing what to hold and what to release. Marcus felt the words pierce through his defenses. He had been doing the same thing since the accident, replaying it endlessly in his mind, like a film he could somehow re-edit. Different routes they might have taken. Different timing that would have changed everything. He tortured himself with 1,000 versions of if only, each one a fresh wound that never healed because he kept reopening it. I cannot force my body to heal through sheer determination. I cannot command cells to obey my wishes. I cannot control whether this treatment works or fails. But I can release my white-knuckled grip on outcomes and instead focus on presence. When I let go of what I cannot hold, my hands become free to embrace what remains. This moment with you, this sunset we're watching, this breath I'm taking right now. Sarah had drawn a simple diagram that Marcus now traced with his finger, 2 circles. One labeled My Control, containing thoughts, choices, responses, effort, attitude. One labeled Not My Control, containing other people, the past, the future, fate, death, illness, accidents. An arrow between them pointed to the words, Stop fighting here. This is where suffering lives. Marcus understood with sudden, sharp clarity. For months, he had poured all his energy into the wrong circle, trying to bargain with the past, trying to resurrect what was gone, trying to change the unchangeable through the force of his guilt and regret. And it had left him hollow, exhausted, powerless, because he was fighting battles that could never be won. He picked up a pen, the first time he had written anything since the funeral. His hand felt strange holding it, as if he'd forgotten this basic human action. In his own shaky handwriting beneath Sarah's diagram, he wrote slowly, I release you to the past where you now live. I release my guilt over what I could not prevent. I release control of what was never mine to command. And in this release, in this opening of my grip, I reclaim myself. I reclaim my presence. I reclaim my power to choose what I do with this day, this hour, this breath. The weight didn't vanish. Grief that deep doesn't disappear with an insight, but it shifted. It changed shape. Grief remained, but the exhausting struggle against reality began to ease. Sarah had known this truth through her illness. Now Marcus would learn it through his loss. Comment. I release what I cannot control. I reclaim my peace. Stoic Truth 3. Reshape your lens. It's not what happens to you, but how you perceive it. Epictetus Journal Entry. April 12th. Emma, I need to tell you about perception, about the stories we tell ourselves about reality. Yesterday, Dr. Chen called us into her office with that careful expression doctors wear when delivering bad news. She said my treatment isn't working as well as they'd hoped. The tumors aren't shrinking. Your father heard failure, hopelessness, the beginning of the end. I heard more time to find another way, another treatment, another path forward. Same words from the same mouth in the same office. Different worlds created by different perceptions. Marcus paused, his breath catching. Same accident, same police report, same basic facts. But his interpretation had created a nightmare far worse than reality. The police report said instantaneous. They felt no pain, no fear, no prolonged suffering. But his mind had twisted it into hours of imagined agony, terror, abandonment. The facts hadn't changed. His perception had poisoned them, had created torture where there was only tragedy. The Stoics taught that events themselves are neutral. A storm is not good or bad, it simply is, a natural phenomenon governed by atmospheric pressure and temperature. Our judgment colors it. We call it terrible when it ruins our plans, beautiful when it waters our crops. When I learned my cancer returned, I could frame it as cosmic punishment for some imagined failing, or as a stern teacher showing me what matters most. I chose teacher, and it taught me to love deeper, live fuller, waste nothing on trivialities. Sarah had listed questions she asked herself daily, a kind of cognitive toolkit for reframing. What else could this mean beyond my first interpretation? What would Marcus Aurelius see here if he were in my position? If this happened to someone I love, what would I tell them about it? What opportunities might exist within this challenge? How might this look different in 5 years? Marcus grabbed another journal page and tried the exercise himself, his pen moving slowly at first, then faster. The accident, his automatic perception, I should have driven them that day. I should have insisted. I failed to protect the people I loved most. I'm responsible for their deaths. Alternative perception. The driver fell asleep at the wheel, a medical emergency no one could have predicted. I was at work, where I was supposed to be. I did not fail because I was never in a position to prevent this. I did not cause this. Fate is simply indifferent, and tragedy strikes without consulting our sense of justice or fairness. His chest tightened as he wrote, resistance rising. But a crack of light appeared in the darkness. Not justification, not denial, not minimizing the loss. Just a different lens that didn't require him to be the villain of his own story, the negligent father and husband who deserved eternal punishment. The world will give you pain, Emma. That's guaranteed, but you get to choose what it means. Pain is data, raw information about damage. Suffering is interpretation, the story we tell about the pain. Master your interpretation, and you master your suffering. Marcus felt something shift. Not erasure of grief, but a slight rotation of perspective. The accident remained tragic, devastating, life-altering, but his role in it, his responsibility, his worth as a father and husband, those were stories he had been telling himself. And stories could be rewritten. Comment: I choose my perception, I reshape my story. Stoic Truth 4. Walk with your mortality. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Seneca Journal Entry, May 20th. Memento mori, remember death. Strange advice from ancient philosophers, isn't it, Emma? In our culture, we hide death away in hospitals and funeral homes, speak of it in whispers, pretend it won't come for us if we just ignore it hard enough. But it's become my most powerful tool for living. When I remember that every moment could be my last with you and your father, suddenly the small irritations dissolve like sugar in water. The arguments over unwashed dishes seem absurd. The love becomes urgent, vivid, impossible to postpone. Marcus read through tears that blurred Sarah's handwriting. She had written this entry 6 weeks before the accident. 6 weeks. She had been thinking about death daily, not morbidly, not with depression or morbid fascination, but practically, as a compass pointing toward what mattered most. Death clarifies everything, my darling. It's like cleaning a foggy window. Suddenly you can see clearly what was always there. If I knew today was my last, would I waste it worrying what strangers think of my appearance? Scrolling mindlessly through social media, envying people I don't even know? Holding grudges over petty slights from years ago? No, never. I would hold your hand until you begged me to stop. Kiss your father like it's our first and last kiss. Watch the sunset like it's the only one that will ever exist. She had created a daily practice, written in bold letters and underlined twice. Live as if this is your last day with the people you love, not in a panicked way, but in a present, grateful, intentional way. Marcus realized with crushing irony. He had spent 3 months wishing he had died instead of them, fantasizing about trading places, imagining scenarios where he took their place in that car. But that wasn't what Sarah would want. She would want him to live, deliberately, fully, in their honor, carrying forward the love she had cultivated so carefully. Emma, when I'm gone, and I will be gone someday, we all will, every single one of us. Don't freeze your life in grief like an insect trapped in amber. Don't make my death the moment your life stopped. Let my death be your teacher. Let it remind you that every breakfast could be your last with someone you love. Every sunset, every laugh, every hug, every ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Unrepeatable miracles that we take for granted until they're gone. Marcus stood, his legs stiff from hours of sitting, and walked to the library window. Dawn was breaking over the city, pink and gold light touching the glass towers, painting the sky in colors that would exist for only minutes before transforming into ordinary day. How many sunrises had he ignored in his grief? How many moments had he sleepwalked through, numb and absent? He pressed his palm against the cold glass and whispered to Sarah, to Emma, to the morning itself. I will not waste the life you would have loved to live. I will carry you forward not in my grief, but in how I choose to be present, in how I choose to love, in how I choose to see each day as the gift it is. Mortality wasn't the enemy. Forgetting mortality, that was the real death, the living death of going through life asleep. Comment. I embrace mortality. I honor life. Stoic Truth 5. Find gratitude in the ruins. The soul is dyed by its thoughts. Think only on those things that can bear the light of day. Marcus Aurelius, journal entry, June 8th. On my worst days, Emma, when the pain is a living thing that claws at me from the inside, when the nausea makes even water taste like poison, when I'm so exhausted I can barely lift my head from the pillow. On those days, I practice radical gratitude. And I need you to understand what I mean by that, because it's not what most people think. I'm not practicing toxic positivity. I don't pretend cancer is a blessing in disguise or that everything happens for a reason. That's spiritual bypassing, and it's garbage. But I do hunt for what remains beautiful even in the wreckage. Today, your laughter at breakfast, loud and free and utterly unself-conscious. Your father's hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. The taste of coffee, bitter and perfect. Small things that suffering makes luminous, like stars that only appear when the sky grows dark. Marcus felt resistance rise in his chest like bile. Gratitude? For what? They were gone, erased, dead. What was there to be grateful for in that absolute absence? But Sarah continued as if anticipating his objection. Epictetus was born a slave, Emma. He lost his freedom, his health, his leg, broken by his master, some historians say. Yet he wrote that gratitude is the antidote to suffering. Not because life becomes easy when you practice gratitude, but because gratitude shifts focus from what's lost to what remains. It's not denial, it's radical honesty about the whole picture, not just the dark parts. She had made lists, Marcus flipped through pages, seeing entry after entry of gratitude practiced like a discipline, like weight training for the soul. Grateful for 12 beautiful years with Emma, not mourning the hypothetical years we won't have. Grateful Marcus loves me enough to grieve this deeply. His pain is proof of our love. Grateful for pain medication, for modern medicine that gives me more time. Grateful for this journal, this pen, the ability to write these words you'll someday read. Grateful for books, for music, for the cat purring on my lap. Grateful for every ordinary moment I once took for granted. Now I see they were all extraordinary, dozens of entries. Even in her final weeks, even when the disease was winning, Sarah had found fragments of light in the darkness. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands, opened a note, and began typing. Grateful Sarah left these journals, this roadmap through grief. Grateful they didn't suffer, that it was quick and painless. Grateful for 15 years of marriage, for every moment we had. Grateful for Emma's 12 years of life, for getting to be her father. Grateful I can still feel this much. Means I loved this deeply. Grateful for this quiet library, for this borrowed time to read and heal. It felt awkward at first, forced, like speaking a foreign language. But as he wrote, something loosened in his chest. Gratitude didn't erase grief. They weren't opposites. They coexisted. Both could be true simultaneously, devastating loss and profound appreciation for what was. The grief proved the love. The love justified the grief. Emma, gratitude won't fix what's broken. It won't resurrect the dead or rewind time, but it will remind you that even in ruins, there are flowers growing through the cracks. Look for them. Train yourself to see them. They're always there. Marcus looked around the library, Sarah's favorite place in the city. Books she had loved lined the shelves. The chair where she read to Emma sat in the corner. They weren't gone. They were transformed, present in memory, in influence, in the way he would live forward. Comment. I find gratitude even in grief. Stoic truth sex. 6. Build resilience through adversity. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius, journal entry. July 15th. I've been thinking about steel, Emma, about how it's made. Did you know that steel is just iron that's been through fire? The raw ore is heated to over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, impurities burned away, carbon added at precise moments, then cooled in carefully controlled conditions. Without the fire, it's just brittle iron. The fire doesn't destroy it. The fire makes it strong enough to build skyscrapers, to forge tools that last generations. And I've been thinking about diamonds too. They're formed 100 miles beneath the Earth's surface under crushing pressure over billions of years. Without that pressure, they're just carbon. Common, unremarkable carbon. The Stoics understood this truth deeply. Adversity isn't the opposite of growth. It's the requirement for it. Marcus remembered Sarah during her second cancer battle, after the brief remission when hope had flourished and then been crushed. She hadn't become bitter. She hadn't turned inward and hard. Instead, she had become sharper, more focused, more present, more herself somehow. Less tolerance for bullshit and pettiness, more capacity for love and depth. The disease had burned away everything superficial, leaving only what was essential. Every hardship is a test, Emma. Not from some cosmic judge keeping score, not from a God who's checking if you're worthy, but from life itself. The universe asks through circumstance. What will you do with this pain? What will you make of this suffering? Some people shatter under pressure. The weight crushes them into smaller, meaner versions of themselves. Others fuse their broken pieces into something harder to break, something more beautiful for having been broken and repaired. She had written about kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with lacquer mixed with gold. making the breaks visible and beautiful rather than hidden. The repaired piece is more valuable than the original, more beautiful for having been broken. Don't hide your scars, my darling. Don't pretend you weren't broken. Let the breaks become gold seams in your story. Let them prove you survived something that might have destroyed you. Wear them as evidence of your strength. Marcus traced the scar on his forearm, a jagged line from the night he punched a wall in rage 2 weeks after the funeral. His knuckles had split. The wall had dented. He had seen it as evidence of weakness, of loss of control, of failure to be the strong man he thought he should be. But Sarah would see it differently. She would see it as evidence he survived the moment he thought would destroy him. He felt the rage and didn't let it kill him. He broke and didn't stay broken. Pain is inevitable, Emma. You can't avoid it by being good enough, or careful enough, or lucky enough. It comes for everyone eventually. But resilience is optional. It's not something you're born with. It's built in the trenches of suffering. When you choose to get up one more time, to breathe one more breath, to try one more day. Every time you face the thing that breaks you and don't let it end you, you become incrementally harder to break. Your capacity grows. You discover reserves you didn't know existed. The library clock chimed 5 a.m. Marcus had been reading for 7 hours straight. 3 journals left. His eyes burned. His back ached. But he felt different. Not healed. Resilience isn't the absence of pain, but changed, tempered. The grief remained, but he was no longer passively drowning in it. He was learning to swim. He understood now with clarity. The accident was his fire, his crucible, his crushing pressure. He could let it burn him to ash, let it crush him into nothing. Or he could let it forge him into something stronger, something that honored Sarah and Emma by refusing to be destroyed. Comment: adversity doesn't break me, it forges me. Stoic Truth 7. Serve something beyond yourself. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Marcus Aurelius journal entry. August 3rd. I've realized something profound, Emma, something that's changed how I think about everything. Suffering becomes unbearable when it has no meaning, when it's just senseless pain that destroys you and teaches nothing and helps no one. But when you transform pain into service, into purpose, when you let it become fuel for something beyond yourself, it changes. Not the intensity, not the reality of it, but the quality. The suffering stops being pure destruction and becomes something generative. Marcus sat up straighter, his spine straightening as if Sarah's words were physically lifting him. She had written this 3 weeks before the accident. 3 weeks. What would she think about this insight now if she knew what was coming? I've decided to volunteer at the children's cancer ward twice a week. Not because I'm fixed or healed or over it. I'm still sick, still scared, still fighting. But because my suffering can light the path for someone else stumbling in the same darkness I've navigated. The Stoics called this oikeiosis, the expansion of your circle of concern beyond yourself, beyond your family, toward all of humanity. When you're drowning in your own pain, expanding outward seems impossible. But it's actually the lifeline that saves you. She described a young girl named Jade, 7 years old, terrified before her first chemotherapy session. The girl's parents had tried to be strong, but their fear was palpable, infecting their daughter with even more terror. Sarah sat with her, held her small hand, shared her own story in language a child could understand, made Jade laugh with silly jokes about her wig collection. In that moment, Emma, my pain had purpose. It wasn't wasted suffering, wasn't meaningless destruction. It was transformed into comfort for someone who desperately needed it. My experience, my knowledge, my hard-won understanding, it became medicine for someone else's fear. And in becoming useful, my suffering became bearable. More than bearable, meaningful. Marcus felt the words land like a physical blow. He had been drowning in self-contained grief, spiraling inward, creating a black hole of suffering that pulled everything into its gravity and let nothing escape. Sarah had faced death by turning outward, by asking, "Who else needs what I've learned? How can my pain serve?" Emma, when suffering threatens to consume you, when the darkness feels absolute, ask yourself, who else is fighting this battle? How can my experience help them? What wisdom has my pain taught me that someone else desperately needs to hear? Purpose is the antidote to despair. Not a cure, but an antidote, something that doesn't eliminate the poison, but neutralizes its worst effects. Marcus thought of his students, the ones who had sent awkward condolence emails he'd never answered, the classes he'd abandoned mid-semester, the office he hadn't entered since the accident. How many of them were grieving silently? How many had lost someone and had no one to show them that survival was possible? He had been a philosophy professor who taught ancient Stoicism as abstract theory. What if he returned and taught it as lived wisdom, forged in real fire, tested in real pain, proven in real grief? He imagined teaching a course called Philosophy Through Loss, using Sarah's journals as text alongside Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. Her wisdom could ripple outward, touching students who would teach others, creating concentric circles of meaning from the center of his tragedy. Don't let your suffering die with you, Emma. That's the real waste, the real tragedy. Give it meaning, transform it into service. Let it light the way for someone else stumbling in darkness. That's how we transcend pain, not by escaping it, but by using it to help others escape theirs. The seventh journal closed. One remained. Outside, the city was waking, cars humming on distant streets, birds singing their morning songs, life continuing its relentless forward motion despite everything. Comment: my pain has purpose. I serve something beyond myself. Conclusion: the journals sit on Marcus's desk now. He teaches again, differently than before, with scars visible, with Sarah's wisdom woven into every lecture. His students don't know the full story, but they feel something different in his classes, authenticity forged in fire. Philosophy not as theory, but as survival tool. Stoicism not as cold logic, but as fierce love for life despite its cruelty. Marcus still grieves. Some mornings are unbearable, but he remembers Sarah's final lesson. Transformation is a choice you make 1,000 times a day. In every moment, suffering whispers, "Give up." You can whisper back, "Not yet." The 8 truths aren't magic. They won't erase your pain, but they will give you a map through it. Master your inner fortress. Release what you cannot hold. Reshape your lens. Walk with mortality. Find gratitude in ruins. Build resilience through adversity. Serve something beyond yourself. Choose transformation over bitterness. These aren't abstract principles. They're battle-tested wisdom from people who face the same darkness you're facing and learn to carry light through it. So, here's your choice, the same one Marcus faces every morning. Will you let suffering define you or refine you? The storm will come. It comes for everyone, but you get to choose who you become in it. Comment: I transform suffering into personal power.